Hey guys, tonight we travel somewhere cold, quiet, and exquisitely tedious, right into the heart of a medieval Korean palace. It's not the king we're following, not even the queen. No. You are a eunuch, a servant with no chance of heirs, glory or retirement hobbies, just a lifetime of routine, whispers, and endless errands behind silken screens. It's the dead of night. You're asleep, or were. A distant bell tolls once, twice. Somewhere in the stone corridors, a heavy wooden door groans and feet shuffle. The air is cold enough to bite your fingertips, even under the wool blanket that smells faintly of rice dust and must. You roll over. Bad idea. Your bunk creaks louder than it should. A cough from the next cot confirms it. You've been noticed. You're not the only one running late, but that won't help when the tally begins. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to see where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You swing your legs over the cot, bare feet meeting the chilled floor with a reluctant slap. The dormitory is narrow and windowless, lined with 40 other bunks, each with its own snoring inhabitant, wool blanket, and nightstand for belongings, which mostly means a comb, a wooden spoon, and maybe a lucky pine cone if you're fancy. You fumble for your robe, brown and scratchy, and tug it on just as the second bell rings. Now you're definitely late. The halls outside are dim, flickering with oil lamps that smoke just a little too much. The air smells of ink, boiled starch, and the distant whiff of fermented soybean paste, leftover from last night's communal soup. You move fast. No running, though. Eunuchs do not run in the palace unless a fire is involved, or the empress is crying. You make it to the outer courtyard just as the roll call begins. A senior eunuch with eyebrows that seem to move independently of his face is holding a scroll, longer than your torso. "You in Seok," he calls, pausing for you to grunt. You raise your hand. The grunt is essential, polite, humble, and not too loud. Somewhere to your left, someone sneezes, followed by a loud slap. Probably Jang again. He always forgets to bow after sneezing. Historians still argue whether these morning calls were for discipline or just a power trip, since they seem to involve more humiliation than productivity. Either way, you're counted, judged, and released to begin your day. The sun hasn't risen yet. You can just make out the dark blue smear of dawn above the garden wall. You're assigned to outer perimeter watch today, which sounds exciting but mostly means making sure nobody has stolen the ceremonial gongs again. Yes, again. You trudge along the palace's rear wall, passing a cluster of sparrows noisily, picking at leftover rice grains from the kitchens. You pause just briefly near the archery court. A very old pigeon sits there, balding, half asleep. No one knows why it never leaves. Some say it's the ghost of a failed general. More likely, it's just fond of the scraps. Eventually, your patrol brings you back near the west gate, where the guards exchange sleepy nods with you. You're not exactly security, but no one dares break rules when a eunuch is watching. Or at least, that's the theory. You once caught a courtier sneaking out wearing his concubine's hairpin. He claimed it was an early fashion experiment. You wrote it up. He sent you a thank you melon the next week. Strange times. You pause now under the west pavilion, rubbing your hands together. The wind is picking up, and your shift isn't over for another hour. You could recite something to stay awake. Most eunuchs memorize long Confucian poems about filial piety and self-restraint, but your favorite is the one about the dragon who refuses to rise because it's too cold. Relatable. There's a scratching sound behind the wall, a fox maybe, or a court musician looking for somewhere to cry. You lean your head against a wooden pillar just for a second. The wood is cold, smooth from decades of polished heads. Yours adds nothing new. A bell rings again, this time from the main kitchen. Time to report for cleansing and breakfast prep. You turn, adjust your robe, and begin the slow walk back through the side corridor that smells like old parchment and fried turnips. No shortcut exists. You tried once. You ended up inside the princess's pigeon house and spent an hour pretending to be a bird inspector. The dormitory is livelier now. Other eunuchs are emerging, some carrying towels, others grimacing at their twisted backs or discussing who tripped over whose sandals. You slide into the back of the queue for the bathhouse, where hot water is more rumor than reality. The line moves. You enter the stone-walled room, filled with steam and regrets. This is where you'll scrub quickly, arms, face, neck, while avoiding the cracked tile with a sharp edge and the basin that smells like pickled radish. Some of the elder eunuchs still recite the oath of service during their bath, muttering through foam and soap like soggy monks. You say it too, but mostly under your breath. I serve without ambition, I guard without question, etc., etc. Then a splash. Someone drops a basin. A chain of curses in classical Chinese follows. You keep your eyes forward. This is not your circus today. Clean enough to pass, you dry off with a towel that's seen better dynasties and head to the hall for seal duty. That's where we'll pick up next. Hunched over jade and ink, trying not to smudge royal signatures while your stomach groans like an angry ox. You shuffle into the seal hall just as the second incense stick begins to burn, your unofficial clock in the mornings. The air is thick with that heavy sandalwood scent, clinging to every robe, scroll, and breath. Overhead, a tiny window lets in a blade of gray light, which lands directly on the jade carving table. You try not to look at it. That light always makes your eyes water. And if your tears fall on a petition, well, let's just say wet ink and imperial signatures don't mix. The room is small and square, lined wall to wall with low tables, each with its own miniature brass lamp and stack of documents waiting to be stamped. You slide into your assigned spot, table 7 again, and set down your pouch of tools, 2 brushes, a wooden stylus, and the red cinnabar paste you mixed yourself last week. Good stuff too, not too gritty, smells faintly of iron and pickled plum. Today's job, check the seals for the Bureau of Rights. That means festival documents, temple permits, and a surprisingly lengthy edict about where the emperor's third cousin is allowed to park his litter during ancestral ceremonies. You start with the easy ones. Smooth calligraphy, perfectly spaced columns, a clean edge on the parchment. You press the jade seal gently into the ink paste, then onto the scroll. With firm, practiced motion, no rocking, no smearing. The dragon motif should look like it's floating, not falling over drunk. The seal itself is hefty, hand-carved, tied with a faded silk ribbon that smells faintly of mothballs. It's more symbolic than practical, but in this court, symbols outrank logic every time. One wrong seal, and a monk in Gyeongju might get a camel instead of a prayer rug. Not that there are many camels in Korea, but still. Historians still argue whether eunuchs truly controlled the flow of documents or simply acted as glorified rubber stamps. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. You've certainly intercepted a few drafts that were meant to be final, and at least once you caught a sneaky courtier trying to adjust the phrasing on his land title by slipping it into the bottom of the pile. Nice try. Across the room, someone coughs pointedly. That's Joseon-min, the senior seal master. He's ancient, probably made of sawdust and opinions, and thinks everyone under 60 is an idiot. He shuffles past your table now, inspecting your stamped scroll with narrowed eyes. You pretend to be intensely focused on the next document, barely breathing as he sniffs loudly and moves on. A win. At precisely the third incense mark. About the time your legs begin to go numb, you switch tasks. Roster duty. You gather your tools and walk 3 doors down to the records annex. It's colder here, and the shelves creak with the weight of 100 years of personnel files, appointment letters, and faded complaint scrolls that begin with utmost humility I report, your job now is to update the attendance roster from this morning's roll call. You pull the thick ledger toward you, fingers catching on the worn cloth binding. The pages are crispy and smell faintly of soy ink and sleep deprivation. You scan the list of names, checking off each one that grunted in time. You pause at Park. Hyo-jin. Was he there? Or was that his cousin filling in? Hard to tell. Identical twins, identical haircuts, identical scowls. You mark him as tentatively present, which is the bureaucratic equivalent of shrugging. The next task is slightly more delicate seal maintenance. That means polishing the imperial seals stored in the ebony chest beneath the registrar's platform. You kneel, retrieve the velvet-wrapped box, and unwrap each seal like it's a relic. Which, technically, it is. One seal has a chipped corner, likely from being dropped during last year's New Year rush. You rub it gently with oil-soaked cloth, polishing the dragon's curved tail until it glints like a fish scale. There's a fringe belief whispered among low-ranking eunuchs that the seals are sentient, that the dragon ones twitch slightly if you insult the king under your breath. You tested this once. Nothing happened. But you still apologized, just in case. As you work, a low conversation filters through the latticed door. 2 junior scribes are arguing about whether the emperor is left-handed. Apparently, he held his chopsticks differently last night. The debate escalates until someone brings up the Queen Dowager's foot size, at which point the conversation abruptly dies. You smile to yourself. Some topics are off-limits, even in jest. Midway through polishing, you catch sight of your reflection in the lacquered table surface. Tired eyes, ink-stained sleeves, a smudge on your cheek that could be cinnabar, or a very unlucky beetle. Hard to tell. You wipe it with a sleeve and pretend not to care. A bell chimes again, this one dull, more like a wooden clunk. That's the kitchen cue. Breakfast for the royals is being prepped, which means you'll soon be needed to assist with the royal meal rituals. You wrap the seals back into their velvet nests, close the chest, and lock it with a key shaped like a lotus blossom. You have no idea why it's shaped like that, but it catches on your sash every time. As you head toward the exit, you pass a tapestry of the founding king hunting a white tiger. The king's posture is heroic, the tiger's less so. You always Thought the artist made it look more like a fat cat than a fearsome beast. Someone probably lost a hand over that. The hallway outside smells faintly of roasted chestnuts and ink glue. Your stomach grumbles like a discontented ox cart. Breakfast can't come soon enough. But first, you'll be sent to the kitchens. Not to eat, of course, but to ferry ingredients and stand quietly while chefs shout and bang copper pots in the name of royal nourishment. That's next. But for now, you savor this moment. The brief pause between duty and more duty, when all you're required to do is walk, breathe, and try not to step on a scurrying mouse, which you just did. Sorry, little guy. By the time you reach the palace kitchens, your nose has already done half the work. There's something unmistakably comforting about the smell of roasted rice and charred scallion, even when you know none of it is for you. The kitchen complex itself is a sensory war zone. Heat, clangs, barked orders, and the steam of 10,000 bubbling things. The walls are lined with stacked clay pots, some hissing slightly, some entirely silent and ominously still. You slip through the side entrance, careful not to brush against the smoke-streaked doorway. Inside, 20 cooks are moving like ants on caffeine, each with a task too specific to explain to an outsider. Slicing ginseng into pieces no wider than a hair, folding lotus petals into dessert wrappings, counting out 7 3/4 pine nuts for the soup. You stand very still at the threshold until someone notices you. "Ah, the eunuch," cries head cook Min, a woman whose voice could shatter porcelain if she wanted it to. She hands you a lacquer tray with 2 bowls of medicinal porridge and a note that reads, simply, "Less salt." His Majesty is feeling damp. You don't ask. You never ask. This is one of those palace phrases that either means, "The Emperor has a cold," or "He had a weird dream and now thinks salt invites ghosts." You balance the tray, bow slightly, and head toward the Jade Pavilion, where breakfast is served to the imperial family with all the solemnity of a funeral rite. Along the way, a junior eunuch nearly collides with you carrying a basket of steamed buns shaped like flowers. You exchange a look that says, "One of us is going to get blamed for that collision," and then keep walking. The path to the pavilion is lined with plum trees, bare now, but still beautiful in their twisting, aged elegance. You catch a glimpse of the Empress's favorite white crane standing in the courtyard. It blinks slowly at you, as if considering whether you're edible. Probably not. Once inside the Jade Pavilion, the tone shifts entirely. Everything is hushed, precise, and unnervingly perfect. The light through the rice paper windows makes everyone look like a shadow puppet. You kneel, place the tray on the designated golden mat, and step back precisely 3 paces, no more, no less. One of the chambermaids nods slightly at you, signaling that your part is done. You back out slowly, resisting the urge to scratch the itch that's been tormenting your shoulder since you walked in. Somewhere behind you, a porcelain spoon clicks against a lacquer bowl. The Emperor is eating, and if he's pleased, you might just get a real breakfast today instead of half a rice cake and a prayer. Historians still argue whether eunuchs were ever truly invisible in the court, or if their presence was more psychologically loaded, constant, quiet, unsettling reminders of loyalty pushed to the limit. You certainly feel invisible sometimes, but the moment a spoon drops or a tray wobbles, every eye finds you like hawks tracking a mouse in the snow. You return to the kitchen empty-handed, where cook Min thrusts a boiled egg into your palm and mutters, "For not spilling." You bow, say thanks, and devour it behind a pantry door, peeling the shell with the urgency of a man sneaking contraband. It's warm, salty, and oddly sweet. For a moment, everything feels okay, until you're summoned again. This time it's to assist with the court's official tasting ritual. Yes, every dish for the royals must be sampled by an appointed eunuch. Not for flavor, mind you, but for poison. You are not the taster today, thank the ancestors, but you are required to stand by with a vinegar cloth and the tasting roster, noting every ingredient sampled, approved, or, on rare occasions, violently rejected. The taster is Young Bae, a cheerful if slightly twitchy man who once fainted after eating a pickled plum that was just too sour. Today, he samples a ginseng-glazed perch and gives you a thumbs up before swallowing. You scribble it down. 5 dishes later, he pauses at a bowl of sea cucumber stew, sniffs it, frowns. You raise an eyebrow. He shakes his head and mutters, "Too much mugwort." Not poison, but a taste offense. It gets struck from the list. You have to record it in triplicate. 1 for the kitchen records, 1 for the Bureau of Food Affairs, and 1 for the Imperial Digest, a somewhat pompous name for a scroll that mostly tracks who got gas after eating what. As you finish writing, you feel the prickle of hunger again. Not the sharp, angry kind, just a dull tug, like your stomach politely reminding you that boiled egg wasn't quite enough. Finally, with all the meals delivered, tasted, and blessed, your moment arrives. Staff meal hour. You join the other eunuchs in the outer courtyard near the servant well, where small bowls of rice, pickled radish, and thin miso soup await on wooden benches. It's not grand, but it's hot, and the rice isn't burnt today. You eat slowly, savoring each bite. Someone next to you cracks a joke about the Emperor's strange new obsession with yuzu peels. Laughter ripples through the group like warm broth. It's the closest thing you'll get to peace today. Someone passes around a dried persimmon, and you get the last bite, sticky, chewy, and just sweet enough to make your jaw twinge. You glance up at the gray sky. No rain, just wind. Better than snow. You stretch your legs under the bench, listen to the distant clang of another meal being prepped, and breathe out, long and slow. But peace never lasts. A bell rings. Not a meal bell this time. A summons bell. Your name is spoken by a courier. Eunuch whose shoes are far too loud. "Requested in the Hall of Writings," he says with a shrug. You groan inside. That means transcribing court poetry again. 4 hours of metaphors about plum blossoms and lonely cranes. You stand, dust off your robe, and begin the walk across the palace grounds toward yet another room filled with ink, silence, and aching knees. Your feet ache slightly as you pass through the western colonnade toward the Hall of Writings. The stones beneath your sandals are smooth and chilled, worn down by centuries of shuffling feet and whispered politics. You've memorized every crack. In this floor, every warped panel in the corridor screens. There's a knot forming in your shoulder already. You know exactly which stool they'll give you. It's the one that leans a little to the left. Inside the hall, the scent of ink is near overwhelming. You're not sure if it's the ink itself, or just the combined weight of all the overly symbolic language that has soaked into the wood. A row of low tables lines the room, each equipped with an inkstone, brush stand, and a depressingly tall stack of rice paper. Your designated spot already has the imperial watermark laid out. A barely visible dragon coiling through the page, like it's just waiting to judge your calligraphy. Today's assignment: transcribing the Crown Prince's latest poem collection. You recognize his calligraphy immediately. He always writes like he's fighting the brush. Jagged, erratic, far too much flourish. You dip your brush in the inkstone, let it soak just enough to drag a slow, even line, and begin your work. You drift like mist through plum branches, oh loneliness, shaped like my shadow. That's poem 1. Poem 2 involves the moon, a crane, and something about regretting a chrysanthemum. You sigh, but keep copying. There's no shortcut here. Each stroke must be perfect. This isn't just busy work, it's documentation. These copies will be archived, judged, and possibly even read aloud during the seasonal recitations. And if the brushwork looks sloppy, it's not the prince who gets blamed. It's you. You glance over at the eunuch beside you. He's fallen. Asleep upright, brush still in hand, mouth slightly open like a snoring koi fish. You suppress a chuckle. You've done the same before. Once you even drooled a little on a metaphor about winter snow, and the blot looked suspiciously like a weasel. You passed it off as abstract art. A bell chimes softly somewhere outside. 3rd hour past mid-morning. You're allowed a stretch. Break. You rise slowly, joints popping in protest, and walk to the side alcove where warm barley tea waits in cracked ceramic pots. You pour yourself half a cup, sip it, and let the bitterness snap your mind back into place. Historians still argue whether the Hall of Writings was ever truly a place for honest scholarship, or just a glorified poetry club. The records are unclear. Some say emperors actually debated philosophy here. Others suggest most of the writing was done by ghost scribes like yourself, while the royals focused on falconry and matchmaking. Today, though, you are the ghost. You finished transcribing the last of the poems, 27 total, including a bonus haiku-style ode to a frog who knew restraint. You suspect it's about a rival prince, but you don't dare comment. A clerk arrives to collect your work. He nods, unimpressed, and mutters something about ink density. You decide not to take it personally. Now comes a surprise. You're assigned to the map room. The map room is rarely opened. It's used only when the court is dealing with foreign envoys, land disputes, or, more frequently, when the king has a new dream and insists someone redraw the boundaries of the visible universe. You shuffle in and are hit by the dry, papery scent of hundreds of rolled scrolls stacked like kindling in carved racks. Your task: gently clean the oldest maps, starting with a cartographic relic from the reign of King Gongmin. The parchment is stiff but intact, the ink faded but decipherable. You unroll it carefully and spot the coastline of Joseon, much thicker than it really is. Cartographers back then liked to make the peninsula look sturdier. Or maybe they just had something against accurate scaling. You use a soft bristle brush to dust the surface, picking up tiny flakes of age and powdered moth. Every so often, you spot little scribbled notes in the margins, some ancient scribe commenting on fishing, roots, or perhaps lamenting the price of brushes. One note simply reads, "He asked me to move the river. I did. It still floods." Quirky as they are, these old maps hold power. They decide who owns what, who rules which village, and how many taxes should be pulled from that soggy rice field. In Jeolla, One line in the wrong place, and someone's grandchild might grow up a peasant instead of a merchant. As you carefully replace one scroll, a question lingers. Did the eunuchs ever use their map access to adjust borders in their favor? Historians still debate this. There's a theory that one high-ranking eunuch subtly redrew the boundaries of a royal hunting ground to include his family's old village. No one noticed until decades later. Back in the present, you finish your cleaning and sealing work just as another eunuch appears with your next assignment. You're to accompany a royal tutor to the archives to retrieve an emotionally suitable historical text for the Crown Prince's afternoon study. The prince, it seems, has become overwrought lately and needs reading material with fewer tragic endings. You accompany the tutor, an irritable man with spectacular eyebrows, to the Grand Archive. He selects a treatise on filial piety and another on courtly decorum, both incredibly dull. You can't help but suggest the folk-tale collection instead, and he actually considers it before dismissing it with a huff. He needs grounding, not bedtime stories, he mutters. You carry the selected scrolls back through the quiet corridors, past a courtesan rehearsing lines for a palace play, past a cat curled in the sun like it owns the entire dynasty. You envy that cat. You drop off the scrolls at the prince's study, bow and retreat, just as the boy sighs loudly at the sight of yet another text on proper conduct when visiting your aunt. Your steps are slower now. The day's wait begins to settle in your bones. But the palace never stops. Next up, courtyard inspection. You'll be counting ceremonial lanterns. Yes, really. The sun hangs a little lower now, casting long slatted shadows through the palace gates as you trudge toward the east courtyard. A light breeze kicks up dust across the paving stones, and the paper lanterns swaying above your head rustle like distant whispers. The air smells faintly of wax, bamboo, and the ghost of last night's incense. Ceremonial lantern inspection. You'd laugh if it didn't involve so much kneeling. There are exactly 108 lanterns in this courtyard alone, an auspicious number meant to reflect the Buddhist concept of worldly temptations. Your job today: make sure none of them are missing, torn, crooked, or out of alignment by more than half a finger's width. Why? Because tonight, a visiting dignitary from Ming China is scheduled to walk through the grounds. And apparently nothing says diplomatic hospitality like evenly spaced sources of warm, flickering light. You begin the count. 1, 2, 3. Your hands move rhythmically. Adjust, smooth, tug, inspect, move on. By lantern 14, you've developed a pattern. By lantern 32, your knees have gone numb. By 46, your mind begins to drift. You wonder who made these lanterns. Probably the same artisan who once shaped royal funeral decorations, and whose handiwork might someday accompany you to your own ceremonial goodbye. You hope it'll at least be red silk. That's supposed to be good luck, even in death. You adjust lantern 59, which is stubbornly tilted. A quick tug fixes it. As you reach for 60, a passing pigeon relieves itself directly onto lantern 61. You stare at it. The bird stares back. The two of you share a long, silent moment of mutual contempt. A junior eunuch runs over with a damp cloth. You clean it. Again. Pigeon 1, Eunuch 0. You pause at lantern 78. It has a tiny inscription at the base, barely legible, but clearly there. Spring Festival, Year of the Tiger. That's over 2 decades ago. Some of these lanterns are older than the palace's newest concubines. You smile faintly. Not everything here gets replaced every few seasons. Historians still argue whether lantern inspections were truly considered meaningful court tasks or simply another form of busy work for eunuchs too junior or too politically neutral to be entrusted with sensitive duties. Some scrolls suggest that lantern inspectors were eventually promoted to interior decorators for the royal quarters. Others say they were just forgotten in the rain. Your stomach growls again. The barley tea helped. But it's wearing off. You think about sneaking a sweet rice bowl from the kitchen, but you know better. Last time you tried that, a guard dog mistook your sleeve for an enemy combatant. You still have the teeth marks. At lantern 93, your back begins to throb. At lantern 99, you miscount and have to start the row over. By lantern 108, you're done. Almost. There's still the official lantern placement scroll to fill out, an elaborate document signed by at least 3 levels of authority to confirm, yes, everything glows just right. You kneel. Again, ink the brush and fill in the precise coordinates and measurements, along with a box marked wax level adequate. You sigh. You didn't know you'd need a degree in candle volume estimation when you joined the palace. Finally, a senior eunuch named Ji-hwan stops by to collect your inspection scroll. He nods approvingly and offers a half-eaten rice cracker. You take it. You're not proud. It's stale, but it's food. As you stretch your legs and rise, you're met by a court artist frantically looking for someone with symmetrical posture to model for a mural draft. You try to disappear into your own sleeves, but it's too late. Your symmetrical suffering has doomed you again. You're dragged to the Hall of Tranquility, less tranquil now that 15 artists are elbowing each other over where your head should tilt. You stand still in a mock pose of eternal court. Vigilance, while they sketch and bicker over whether your earlobes are too short for the composition. You resist the urge to sneeze. One artist, clearly newer than the rest, sidles up to you and whispers, "Do you get bored?" You blink slowly. "Only during the exciting parts." He nods solemnly, as if you've said something profound. You have not. The mural sketch finally ends and you're dismissed, though not before they measure your hands and declare them almost ideally forgettable. You're not sure whether that's an insult or a compliment, but you accept it. With grace. You return briefly to your quarters, a humble shared room on the western edge of the palace compound. Your cot is neatly made, your writing kit arranged just as you left it, your robe folded into the shape of a fish by the ever-enthusiastic cleaning eunuch who believes in origami therapy. You undo the fish. You sit. But there's no rest. A bell chimes again. This time, it's the Department of Ceremonies calling. You've been chosen to assist in prepping the rehearsal for tomorrow's royal audience. That means scripting movements, marking carpet placement, and helping the court singers practice their 5-part harmony greeting chant. You arrive at the rehearsal hall just in time to witness 2 court musicians arguing over whether the 3rd tremolo should be held for 2 or 3 beats. You don't even know what a tremolo is, but you nod sagely when consulted. Your job is mostly logistical, ensuring that the tribute mats are rolled out evenly, the walkways are exactly 16 paces apart, and the kneeling zones are labeled discreetly with chalk symbols. You crouch to draw one and suddenly feel a sneeze brewing. The chalk dust tickles your nose like an evil butterfly. You fight it. You win. Barely. Later, as the royal dancers rehearse their synchronized bows, you help adjust a headpiece that keeps falling off. One dancer winks at you. You pretend not to notice. Flirting with eunuchs is both frowned upon and oddly common. Some say it's the safest rebellion in a very unsafe place. Historians still argue whether eunuchs truly wielded invisible power during court ceremonies, subtly guiding proceedings through gesture and presence, or if they were simply decorative assistants with good memory. The truth, like most things here, is probably somewhere in the middle. The rehearsal wraps up just as the bells ring for evening prayers. You're dismissed at last. You wander back through the torch-lit corridors, your feet moving automatically now, your mind a little foggy. You pass the kitchens, someone's baking sesame cakes, and the smell is so unfair you almost groan. You press on. Back in your room, you sit on your cot, brush out your sleeves, and light a tiny oil lamp. You're given an hour of free time before night duty. Most eunuchs use it to nap, write poetry, or play at Go. You pull out your ink set. Tonight, you write a short verse about pigeons, revenge, and lanterns. You title it, Justice, Eventually. Evening deepens across the palace like a velvet curtain slowly pulled over the world. The cicadas have quieted down, giving way to the rustle of night wind in the persimmon trees. Your lamp flickers once, twice, then steadies. Night duty begins. You report to the inner court corridor just beyond the Queen Dowager's apartments. It's the sort of assignment that sounds glamorous, but mostly involves standing very still, trying not to blink too loudly, and announcing visitors in a voice both respectful and audible, but never under any circumstances emotionally expressive. You take your position beside a painted wooden screen adorned with cranes and pine trees, symbols of longevity and loyalty, though the paint is chipped where someone leaned too hard last winter. From this spot, you can see only part of the inner garden. Occasionally, a figure in elaborate robes passes by, a lady in waiting here, a senior consort there, drifting through the corridors like half-formed thoughts. You do not meet their eyes, not unless spoken to, especially not if they're crying, which is more common than you'd think. Somewhere deeper in the complex, you hear a zither being plucked with studied delicacy. It's the Queen Dowager herself. She always plays before bed, sometimes lullabies from her childhood, sometimes ominously slow folk songs with no clear melody. No one comments. You just stand and listen, letting the sound wrap around your skull like warm gauze. Night air cools the back of your neck. A moth flutters past your ear, tries to die in your lamp, then thinks better of it. You envy its freedom to change its mind. Tonight, the Queen Dowager has requested a reading. You're handed a scroll from the official collection, a story about a loyal minister who disguised himself as a wild dog to spy on his enemies. You're tasked with delivering it to her outer chamber. Inside, the candlelight glows through silk curtains, casting peach-colored shadows against the lacquered walls. You bow deeply, keep your gaze respectfully downward, and offer the scroll on a silk-wrapped tray. She takes it wordlessly, nods once, and gestures you to remain. A test, perhaps. Or maybe she's just lonely. You kneel by the doorway, silent as the lacquered crane statue beside you while she reads. Her fingers are stained slightly with plum juice. She turns the pages slowly, occasionally murmuring to herself, words like clever and foolish, and once oddly turnips. Minutes pass. You begin to drift. Somewhere in the distance, a drumbeat sounds, the 4th hour of the night. Your relief is scheduled for the 6th, but you can already feel your body waging war against your spine. Historians still argue whether eunuchs assigned to the inner court gained favor through silent proximity or slowly faded into human wallpaper. The records show both outcomes. One eunuch became so trusted by the Queen Dowager that she requested his opinion on state edicts. Another tripped over her dog once and was reassigned to plum orchard duty for 5 years. Eventually, she looks up and says, "You may go." Her voice is soft, aged, but precise. You bow again and back away with the practiced grace of someone who knows every creaking spot in this floor. Back in the corridor, your next task arrives wrapped in gold-lacquered absurdity. You are to help supervise the night kitchen's delivery to the Crown Prince. Why? Because last week he complained that his midnight millet porridge was emotionally tepid. You arrive at the small kitchen annex, where a nervous cook is ladling precisely measured porridge into a jade bowl. The steam rises like a ghost with opinions. Your job? Make sure the tray is balanced, the bowl centered, and the side dish, fermented radish, placed at a comforting visual distance. The prince receives the tray without incident. He doesn't thank you, but he doesn't complain either. That's a win. You return to the night duty office and sit for a moment in the narrow antechamber that smells faintly of pine and floor polish. Another eunuch, older than you and missing half an eyebrow, is writing a letter home. He looks up, says nothing, then offers a slice of candied lotus root. You accept. It's overly sweet and slightly chewy, like most polite conversations here. There's a soft knock on the outer panel. You rise and open it to reveal one of the royal astrologers. He's lost. Again. The man is old, blind in one eye, and carries more silver charms than a traveling merchant. He's looking for the Southern Observatory. You gently redirect him, guiding him past the lotus pond and through the vine-covered arch that smells like wet earth and frustrated mathematics. As you return, you reflect briefly on the existence of the astrology team. They read the stars, interpret dreams, and once insisted that a cat sneezing on the Empress's birthday meant national misfortune. Historians still argue whether any of their predictions ever actually shaped policy, or if the court just liked having someone to blame when it rained during parades. Back at your post, the hour creeps forward. You're now into the 5th. One more to go. You pass the time copying characters from a children's tale into your notebook, not for duty, just to keep your mind from folding in on itself. The story involves a monkey, a missing sandal, and a turtle with boundary issues. You wonder if anyone would notice if you slipped it into tomorrow's official reading list. Finally, the bell chimes. 6th hour. Dawn is near. Your relief appears, bleary-eyed and resentful, holding a cup of warm rice wine like it's a shield against the void. You nod at each other. No words exchanged. No need. You return to your quarters. The hallway smells of oil lamps and wet stone. A fox crosses the courtyard. Or maybe it's just a very confident cat. You peel off your robe, fold it carefully, and lie down on your cot. The room is still. A candle flickers somewhere beyond the screen. Your eyes close. Tomorrow, there will be more scripts to write, more scrolls to carry, more metaphorical frogs to interpret. But for now, there is sleep. And the distant quiet sound of someone playing the zither. You wake up before sunrise, as always, to the temple bell's low, bone-deep hum drifting across the rooftops. The kind of sound that doesn't just ring, it sinks into your ribs like a reminder that, yes, life is still happening. Unfortunately, you sit up slowly, the straw mat rustling beneath you. Your robe is still where you folded it last night, creased at the elbows, a bit stiff around the collar, but passable. The cleaning eunuch has been in and out already. You know this because your ink brushes are organized by height again, and someone has drawn a tiny smiley face on your tea bowl with leftover soot. It's either a blessing or a threat. You sip anyway. You wash quickly, using water stored in the clay basin outside the dormitory. It's cold enough to make your teeth wince. You're one of the first up, and for a few precious moments you have the corridor to yourself. The only sound is the wind teasing the paper screens and the faint snore of the eunuch in room 3, who dreams exclusively in rhyming couplets. Today's assignment, ceremonial laundry. You groan internally. You report to the Palace Laundry Pavilion, a building that smells like wet linen, soap bark, and crushed flower petals. Outside, massive stone tubs are already steaming. Several junior eunuchs are elbow-deep in hot water, beating silk garments against washboards carved with lotus designs. One hums a bawdy song under his breath. Another wears gloves fashioned from melon rinds to protect his chi. You choose not to ask. Your task today is to inspect the embroidery on the Queen's seasonal hanbok before it's returned to her chamber. This is not just laundry. This is protocol at the molecular level. Each thread must be in place, each phoenix. Motif untouched by soap stain or fraying edge. You lay out the garment on a raised drying rack, adjusting it until the morning sun hits it just right. Gold thread glints. The cloud stitching along the hem swirls in almost imperceptible curves. You lean closer, then closer still. There it is, a tiny flaw. One silver thread out of alignment, curling slightly like a misplaced eyelash. You pluck it delicately with tweezers made of bamboo and mutter an apology to the seamstress who will inevitably notice anyway. Historians still argue whether royal clothing inspections were acts of obsessive ritual control or necessary displays of symbolic precision. Some claim that a misplaced stitch once delayed a coronation by 2 weeks. Others think the eunuchs just needed something quiet to do while avoiding court intrigue. The truth may lie in a pile of ceremonial socks no one wants to claim. After the hanbok inspection, you're sent to the lower storage room to inventory ceremonial fans. There are dozens of them, each with a unique purpose. Fans for spring, fans for imperial processions, fans for mourning, fans used only on Thursdays when the moon is waning and the emperor is in a bad mood. You check for dust, mold, and bug bites. Some fans are decorated with fine peacock feathers, others with tiny ink paintings of pine branches. One is strangely warm to the touch. You set it aside. After the fans come the slippers. Oh, the slippers. Royal footwear is not designed for comfort. It's designed for symbolism. The Queen's wedding slippers are covered in embroidered cranes and inlaid with beads that clack like judgment with every step. Your job is to ensure they're still intact and symmetrical, because the wrong heel height could be interpreted as an omen of political imbalance. You align each pair carefully on a lacquered tray and whisper apologies to your spine. A fellow eunuch enters the storage room carrying what looks like a tray of desserts. You brighten until you realize it's actually a ceremonial offering. Sticky rice balls, dried persimmon slices, and sweetened lotus root. Not for you, for the ancestral shrine. He winks and slips you a sliver of candied ginger. You chew thoughtfully and try not to cry. As midday approaches, the ceremonial items are returned to their display cabinets under lock and seal. You double-check the records, ink your signature in the ledger with a brush made from ox hair, and place your fingerprint beside it, your pinky, as is custom. You finally get a break. You wander toward the east side of the palace grounds where a small garden has been carved out of the stone walkways like a sigh. It's quiet here. The plum blossoms are just starting to fall. A gardener trims the bonsai with the seriousness of someone writing poetry using hedge clippers. You sit on a stone bench and take a deep breath. A young eunuch joins you. He's new, his robe still too clean, his posture still too proud. He asks, "How do you survive here?" You think for a moment, then say, "By not expecting fairness, or privacy, or good snacks." He laughs, then stops when he realizes you aren't joking. The bell rings again. You both rise. Next stop, rehearsal for the royal birthday procession. It's not until next month, but the practice starts now, because when it comes to royal choreography, perfect means boring in the most exquisite way. You and 7 other eunuchs are assigned to hold the canopy above the queen's litter. It's a delicate dance, each step timed, each arm height matched to the others. One misstep, and the canopy tilts, which could send a tray of flower petals cascading onto the wrong concubine's head. That happened once. The petals were later declared an ill omen, and 3 days of prayers followed. You practice the formation over and over under the watchful eye of the chief protocol officer, a man whose eyebrows move more than his lips. He claps once sharply. You step. He claps again. You pivot. He frowns. You hold your breath. Eventually he nods. You're released. You stagger back to your quarters in time to see the cook dropping off dinner rations, cold barley porridge, 1 pickled radish, and a single roasted chestnut. You eat it all in 5 minutes and feel almost grateful. As night falls again, you sit beneath the covered walkway, watching palace lanterns blink to life like polite fireflies. Somewhere, a dog barks. Somewhere else, a concubine laughs. You lean against a wooden pillar and let your eyelids droop. One more day in the silken maze of duties, rituals, and symbolic footwear. You almost understand why the moths always head toward the flame. You're back on kitchen duty. Again. You suspect this is a silent punishment for that one time you sneezed during the morning incense offering. Or perhaps it's just your turn. In the palace, the line between cosmic consequence and bureaucratic scheduling is almost non-existent. The royal kitchen in the early morning smells like ambition and overcooked millet. Huge steamers hiss as rice cakes puff up like anxious clouds. Junior cooks scurry around, half-dressed in aprons and sleep, stirring porridge and chopping roots with terrifying speed. A meat cleaver hits the chopping board like a punctuation mark, over and over. Your job today isn't glamorous. You're assisting with the noble breakfast trays, which sounds elegant, but mostly means you're folding napkins in the shape of pine cones and making sure none of the dishes are too suggestively shaped. Yes, that's a real guideline. You once watched a whole plate of perfectly sliced persimmons get rejected because they looked emotionally provocative. Historians still argue whether such kitchen rules reflected deeply ingrained symbolic beliefs or just a chronic case of food anxiety among the court elite. Either way, here you are, adjusting the angle of an ornamental plum slice by 2 degrees. The queen prefers her broth lukewarm with precisely 4 petals of chrysanthemum floating on top. The crown prince wants his seaweed soup arranged to resemble a victorious military campaign, whatever that means, and one of the concubines refuses to eat anything the color of disappointment. You move between trays, checking presentation, stabilizing lacquer bowls with strips of damp cloth so they won't slide en route, and whispering encouragement to a steamed squash that refuses to hold its spiral. Sometimes the vegetables feel more high maintenance than the humans. Once everything is plated and inspected, it's your job to accompany the tray to the queen's antechamber. You walk slowly, balancing it like you're defusing a very edible bomb. The queen is already seated behind her curtain, half listening to a poetry recitation. You kneel, place the tray on the lacquered stand, and back away in 3 steps, never turning your back. It's a ballet of invisible movements. You don't breathe until you're back in the hallway. Then comes the waste tray. The leftovers. Yes, there are leftovers. Always. No royal ever eats everything on the tray. It would imply desperation, or worse, enjoyment. Etiquette requires a little restraint, a little untouched pickled fern here, a spoonful of rice there, and it's your job to carry that waste tray to the disposal area. But before you toss anything, the food is briefly reviewed by a eunuch inspector with the title Overseer of Comestible Intent. His job? Detect poison, or any deviation from the dish's original appearance. If the queen left her radish untouched, and it looks even slightly puffier than before, he'll log it in a red ink journal with notes like suspicious fermentation suspected, or may have resembled deceased relative. This is not a joke. Poison paranoia runs deep in the royal kitchen. You've been warned at least 5 times never to accept snacks from unfamiliar hands. Even fruit. Especially fruit. Grapes can be traitorous. You once heard a story, likely exaggerated, of a eunuch who stole a leftover rice ball and claimed to dream in Scylla poetry for a week. Historians still argue whether he was hallucinating, cursed, or just extremely impressionable. With breakfast wrapped, you're finally sent to the spice room, a place that smells like your nose is attending a royal banquet by itself. Wooden drawers line the walls, each labeled in old calligraphy: ginseng, angelica, dried jujube, ground cinnamon, ox bile. Yes, really. And a dozen other substances used in medicinal broths or less explainable side dishes. You assist a kitchen scribe in measuring ingredients for the king's digestion tonic. The recipe includes powdered deer antler and dried centipede. You do your best not to inhale. Lunch prep begins before breakfast. Dishes are even dry. Today's royal menu: grilled eel with pickled garlic, chestnut pancakes, and a lotus root salad that must be arranged in the shape of a crane mid-flight. You're tasked with slicing the eel, delicately, diagonally, and absolutely without eye contact. You accidentally glance at one of the eel heads. It seems to judge you. By midday, the kitchen is a warm battlefield of smells, movements, and passive-aggressive instructions barked across clay stoves. You mop up a spilled soy glaze, nearly trip over a junior cook carrying 16 quail eggs, and catch another eunuch trying to snack on a ginger candy meant for the Empress Dowager. You raise an eyebrow. He swears it was an accident. He's lying. You both know it. At last, lunch is dispatched in covered trays. You trail behind the delivery eunuchs like a second shadow, just in case something tips or a tray begins to wobble. It happens. Once, a rogue squirrel launched itself at a plum tart en route to the dowager's veranda. Chaos. Exorcism. Apologies written in gold ink. You finished just in time to help clean. Scouring the soup pots, scrubbing the steamers, and organizing the jade chopsticks by size and scratch pattern. The kitchen must return to a sacred state of chaotic harmony. Not spotless, just intentional. You step outside for a moment. Let the wind cool your forehead. Someone's burning pine in a distant brazier, and the smoke trails up like incense, soft and lazy against the afternoon sky. A cloud shaped suspiciously like a cucumber floats by. You glance at your hands, smelling faintly of garlic, rice wine, and something you're pretty sure was dried wasp. Just another Tuesday. Dinner prep will begin in under 2 hours. For now, you sit on a small bench behind the kitchen door, sipping barley tea that tastes like disappointment and toasty dirt. Another eunuch joins you, older, tired. He offers a joke about a concubine, a goose, and 3 jars of sesame oil. You laugh harder than you should. He nods, satisfied. The Queen's tea-hour bell rings. You groan and rise, because yes, it's kitchen duty again. But at least for the moment, no one has asked you to spiral a squash. You're summoned to the Office of Calligraphy and Official Records, which sounds grand, but mostly smells like damp paper and dried ink. The palace scribe has fallen ill from what he dramatically described as overexposure to poetic melancholy, and you've been assigned to assist with transcriptions until his tragic sensibilities recover. You take your place in a chilly side chamber filled with scrolls, inkstones, and an unnerving number of antique paperweights shaped like tigers. An older eunuch, hunched and silent, sits across from you. He gestures to your brush, then to the stack of edicts that need copying. The top one is a royal proclamation about goose migration. The second is an apology to a Buddhist monk whose pagoda was accidentally painted yellow instead of gold. This is your life now. You grind the ink with practiced hands, slow, meditative circles, coaxing blackness from soot and water. The room fills with the soft rasp of brushes across rice paper. You begin to write, slowly, carefully. Each character must be flawless, not just legible. One flick of the wrist too loose, and your eternal wisdom could look like eternal indigestion. Historians still argue whether calligraphy in court was more valued for its aesthetic elegance or its bureaucratic power. The old eunuch mumbles, not looking up. Personally, I think the brush is just an extension of royal paranoia. You nod solemnly. You are 3 words into the edict about geese, and already your wrist is aching. The palace prefers its documents written in formal hanja, the Chinese characters that whisper status, sophistication, and subtle passive aggression. Each word carries a weight older than the walls around you. A decree is not just a decree. It's a performance in 40 strokes or less. As the morning drags on, you're tasked with copying a poem written by the Queen's youngest nephew. It's about a willow tree, and longing, and something metaphorical involving fish. The handwriting is a mess, clearly composed in a burst of hormonal inspiration. You sigh and begin decoding. 2 pages in, you find a line that reads, "Her gaze like an ox cart of stars." You pause, you blink, you write it anyway. Later, you're asked to inventory the paper supply in the scriptorium, and oddly soothing. Job that involves sorting piles of silk paper, hemp parchment, mulberry sheets, and one roll of unusually cursed rice paper that's been stored upside down since last year's exorcism. Each type of paper has a purpose. Silk sheets for royal edicts, mulberry for love letters and apology poems, hemp for bureaucratic orders and punishment logs. And the cursed one? Well, let's just say no one wants to touch it first. A junior eunuch hovers near the cabinet, eyeing the scrolls. Do you think the king reads any of this? He whispers. You shake your head. Not unless it's shaped like a deer or sings. You break for tea. Well, technically. Your tea is more like lukewarm barley water in a chipped cup with a painted rabbit on the side. Still, you sip slowly. Your fingers stained faintly black with ink. Another task arrives. You're now to help prepare documents for the upcoming harvest tax inspection. This involves copying records of rice stores, millet yields, and suspiciously low cabbage counts from the southern provinces. You copy numbers until your vision blurs. At one point, you misspell the word for grain and accidentally write grave. You correct it with a red stamp shaped like a koi fish and hope no one notices. Or that someone does and writes a satirical poem about it. You take a short break to stretch, stepping out into the hallway. Scrolls tucked under your arm, you watch. A butterfly tries to land on a palace guard's helmet. It fails, twice. You whisper a quiet cheer when it succeeds on the third try. Back inside, a new stack of documents awaits. This time, petitions from citizens. One requests that a neighbor be punished for impersonating a shaman with poor results. Another accuses a noble's cat of stealing dried squid from a temple. You read each one aloud to yourself in a bored whisper and file them under pending laughter. Suddenly the chief archivist enters. His robes rustle like annoyed parchment. He's here to approve your earlier copies. He reads silently, then grunts, then nods. Acceptable, he says. This is the closest you'll get to a compliment today. Maybe this week. He walks off, trailing a scent of old ink and faint resentment. Feeling triumphant, you return to the poetry section of the chamber. You've been asked to select verses for the Emperor's upcoming mood stabilization hour, a curious ritual where he listens to calming poetry while sipping medicinal tea and frowning at a bonsai. You pick a few verses. Something about rain. On rooftops, another about the sea forgetting your name, and one about the loneliness of dumplings. It's modern. It's bold. Later, you overhear a debate between two scholars regarding the correct brushstroke for the word eternity. One says it curls inward like a monk's regret. The other insists it should flick upward like ambition with a cramp. You leave them to it. You're given the final task of the day, binding the copied scrolls into lacquered covers. This involves thread, glue, patience, and a quiet prayer that you won't sneeze mid-bind. The scrolls are wrapped in silk ties and placed in the document hall, where they'll sit quietly for years, possibly never opened, but preserved like echoes waiting for ears. You wash your hands at the basin, the black ink swirling down like shadowy ribbons. The sun is starting to set. You exhale. In a palace where words shape law and letters carry honor or doom, you have added your quiet, perfect brushstrokes to history. Even if the only people who ever read them are future eunuchs with nothing better to do. By the time the sun dips low behind the tiled rooftops, casting long shadows that look like stretched-out calligraphy, you're summoned, again, to the Hall of Ritual Harmony. And no, this isn't where they hand out cookies or mutual respect. This is where you'll assist with tonight's official court ceremony. The ceremony changes nightly. Sometimes it honors ancestors. Sometimes it celebrates a comet. Once it was for a goose that appeared unusually symmetrical. Tonight, it's a full moon offering. Something about seasonal balance and pleasing the mountain spirits. You're not totally clear on the specifics, but you nod gravely like you are. Your task is simple in theory. Carry a tray of ceremonial offerings and stand perfectly still beside the royal priest. For 2 hours, in mosquito weather. The tray includes symbolic items, jade chopsticks, polished rice grains in sacred formations, a small bronze mirror for reflecting truth, and a dried gourd carved with something that resembles a confused tiger. You carry it like it's made of ambition and glass. The courtyard is already filling with smoke from incense and fire pots. Musicians tune their gayagum quietly. A small choir of palace women rehearses a chant about lunar purity, their voices threading through the night like gentle ghosts. It's hauntingly beautiful, even if the lyrics mention mildew for some reason. As you take your place near the altar, you notice the head ritualist fussing over the alignment of a ceremonial pine branch. He adjusts it half an inch, steps back, frowns, adjusts it again. You've seen nobles choose less carefully between heirs. The ceremony begins. A bell rings once, low and heavy. The court goes still. The king emerges from behind a gold-screened entrance, flanked by attendants. His robes shimmer faintly under torchlight, deep blue silk embroidered with silver cranes. He moves slowly, deliberately, like each step is being judged by history. You bow as one. Deep, spine-stretching, neck-cramping deference. The first chant begins. Something about eternal cycles, patience, and possibly bean sprouts. It's hard to tell from this distance. A gong sounds. Dancers in layered hanbok robes begin their careful, swirling patterns across the courtyard stones. It's all timed to the beat of a single drum, played so softly you wonder if it's just the sound of your own pulse slowing to match. Historians still argue whether these nightly ceremonies were sincerely spiritual or just elaborate political theater. Either way, your knees hurt. The king approaches the altar. You step forward, offering the tray at a precise angle. He does not look at you. He looks through you. You hold your breath as he selects a small token, a lotus seed, and drops it into the offering fire. Smoke curls upward like a whispered secret. He whispers something too, but it's in classical Chinese, and your brain is too numb to translate. Once the fire is fed and the chant reaches its final echoing hum, the king retreats. The court slowly unfolds from stillness like a paper fan, in reverse, and just like that, the ceremony ends. You stand for another 10 minutes just to be sure. After the officials and nobles leave, the cleanup begins. You, of course, help. The altar is dismantled piece by piece, offerings respectfully removed, incense extinguished. One of the priest assistants accidentally bumps a jar of sacred honey. You both pretend it didn't happen. Back inside the storage chamber, you help tuck away the ceremonial items into velvet-lined chests, fans embroidered with ancestral names, bells wrapped in old silk, and a long pole topped with a carved phoenix that always smells faintly of cinnamon. No one knows why. You're Almost done when the head ritualist approaches. "You are still tonight," he says, barely glancing at you. It's the highest praise he's capable of. You nod, pretending not to smile. He hands you a small charm, a brass coin with a square, hole and strange characters around the edge. "For balance," he mutters, "or posture. I forget which." You slip it into your sleeve. It's heavier than it looks. As you head back toward the residential halls, the night is fully draped across the palace like a silk robe. Torches flicker. Cicadas chirp with relentless optimism. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then thinks better of it. You're stopped briefly by a younger eunuch. He's carrying 2 cushions and looks panicked. "Have you seen the Empress's moon pillow?" he asks. You point toward the lotus garden. "Check under the stone crane. That's where dreams go to die." He blinks, nods slowly, and vanishes into the darkness. Back in your chamber, you finally sit. Ceremonial duty is exhausting in a unique way. You haven't run or lifted anything heavier than a tray, and yet every muscle hums with fatigue. Maybe it's the silence, the absolute control, the pressure of standing in service to gods and monarchs, and hoping neither notices you too much. You remove the coin from your sleeve, hold it up to the lamplight. The characters read, "Stillness feeds the sky." You exhale. For all the layers of tradition, the rigid formality, and the endless repetition, there's something comforting about it. Like a lullaby in architectural form, everything means something. Even if you don't always understand what, before you sleep, you light a single stick of sandalwood incense, unofficial but deeply necessary. You let the smoke curl upward toward the ceiling beams, where it mingles with cobwebs and the long-held breath of 100 former eunuchs. You close your eyes and wonder if the moon ceremony actually worked. Will the mountain spirits be pleased? Will the geese fly straighter? Will tomorrow be 1 degree less complicated? Probably not. But at least, tonight you didn't drop the tray. The next morning, you wake not to birdsong or the chime of a servant's bell, but to the jarring sound of someone arguing about radishes. You sit up, blink blearily, and realize it's the head kitchen eunuch scolding a junior steward for miscounting the pickled vegetables meant for a visiting magistrate's brunch. Apparently, radishes are not just radishes. They are statements of diplomatic respect, sliced into floral patterns and served in odd numbers for balance. Of course, you stretch, wince at the crick in your neck, and begin your morning routine. Teeth scrubbed with salt, face splashed with cold water from a jade basin, robe adjusted with the dignity of someone pretending they didn't drool on their sleeve last night. Today, you're assigned to assist in the preparation for a foreign envoy's arrival. Delegates from the Ryukyu kingdom are expected, and everything must appear effortless, by which, of course, the court means the opposite. You report to the hall of reception, where palace attendants are already sweeping the stone floor with peacock feather. Brooms. A floral arrangement of chrysanthemum and pine is being hotly debated. Should it lean east, slightly more north? Should the chrysanthemums be cream or death pink? Historians still argue whether these intricate preparations were sincere, gestures of welcome or veiled power plays disguised in foliage. Probably both. Your first task is arranging name scrolls, long silk banners inscribed with each envoy's name, title, and a poetic compliment. One of them reads, "Dragon-minded thinker of maritime peace," Another simply says, "He who walks." Like bamboo. You try not to giggle. Then come the gift inspections. All diplomatic exchanges must be double-checked. The king will offer gold-threaded cloth, medicinal herbs, and a painting of cranes in flight. In return, the Ryukyu envoys are bringing rare coral, exotic teas, and, rumor has it, a turtle that sings when it's startled. You sincerely hope that part's true. You're directed to the reception wardrobe room next, where the eunuchs help. The king's aids into formal wear. Layers upon layers of stiff silk, embroidered with imperial symbols. Dragons for dominance, phoenixes for harmony, clouds for inscrutable decision-making. You assist a senior attendant in adjusting a collar that keeps folding like a pastry. The attendant mutters that if it wrinkles once more, he's shaving his head and becoming a monk. When the envoys arrive, the entire palace seems to hold its breath. There's a delicate clinking of sandals on stone, a rustle of robes, the quiet hiss of silk upon silk. The Ryukyu delegation enters with solemn grace, accompanied by music from stringed instruments you don't recognize. Their robes are rich with colors not seen in Joseon garments, deep amber, sea green, bold crimson. You stand at the edge of the grand hall, a quiet observer, watching the dance of diplomacy unfold. The king greets them with a nod so subtle you wonder if you imagined it. Speeches are exchanged, translated, and exchanged again. You catch only pieces. May our nations flow like twin rivers. The coral grew in the shadow of sacred waves. We accept your turtle with great humility and curiosity. Your eyes flicker toward the box containing said turtle. It remains ominously quiet. Either it's shy or plotting something. The formalities continue. Tea is served, brewed from a blend rumored to contain 7 flowers and the dew of dawn. You help pour, careful not to spill. One wrong move, and it's the diplomatic equivalent of calling someone's mother a cabbage. The senior officials begin discussing trade, regional cooperation, and mutual concerns about pirates who've been getting a little too theatrical. You tune out, focusing instead on the subtle cues. How one envoy taps his fan twice when bored, how the queen's advisor winces every time someone mispronounces silk roots. Then, suddenly, your name is whispered. You're pulled aside. Verki. King's chief translator is ill from too much fermented yam liquor. You're being asked to assist with a quick ceremonial poem translation. You panic briefly, then nod. Internally, you scream. The poem is an offering from the Ryukyu leader. Something about ocean winds and golden leaves. You read it quickly, then do your best to translate it into courtly Korean. Your version. The wind bears petals from across the sea. 1,000 miles, 1,000 thoughts, folded into coral dreams. The king nods, satisfied. The Ryukyu envoy smiles faintly. You exhale. Later, in a quieter chamber, you help the envoys settle into their guest quarters. You show them where the firewood is stored, how to signal for hot water, and politely explain that the chamber pots are not ornamental vases. A small cultural hiccup, handled with poise. As evening approaches, you're invited to the outer garden to witness a performance in honor of the guests. Dancers in paper lantern costumes float across the grass like glowing spirits. A solo flutist plays a song called "Evening Crickets Forget Their Name." You admire the absurd accuracy. You sit with the other eunuchs near a pond that reflects the full moon. One of them offers you a candied persimmon. You accept, biting into the sugary treat as laughter from the nobles carries softly through the air. For a moment, it all feels human. You think about the Ryukyu men, thousands of miles from home, smiling politely while eating pickled burdock and pretending they enjoy it. You think about your own role, so often invisible, so carefully orchestrated. And yet here you are, translating poems, arranging name scrolls, pouring tea like it's an Olympic event. At the end of the night, a eunuch named Seok leans over and whispers, "You know, I think the turtle likes you." You glance at the ornate box near the platform. It shifts slightly. You decide to believe him. The turtle, as it turns out, doesn't sing, at least not in any conventional way. The next morning, when you pass by the guest courtyard, where the Ryukyu envoys are staying, you catch sight of it basking on a polished stone under a strip of gauze-like sunlight. Its shell gleams faintly like lacquered bronze, and it looks up at you with what can only be described as mild judgment. Seok stands beside you. "Maybe it only sings when emotionally moved," he offers. "Or when it's plotting world." "Domination," you whisper back. "Either way, no turtle opera today. Today's tasks, however, are far less ceremonial. You're back to logistics, inventory, palace storage, and a minor crisis involving a missing batch of tribute spices from Vietnam. You spend the better part of an hour checking storerooms for a crate labeled Star Anise and Friends. You finally find it in the wrong wing, shoved behind a stack of ceremonial umbrellas. Mystery solved. International incident averted. While rearranging the storage shelves, you stumble across something unexpected. A dusty ledger bound in leather, far older than the others. You flip through it cautiously. Inside are meticulous records from eunuchs who served 2 reigns ago. Meals served, repairs made, gossip noted in neat side columns. One entry reads, "Third-level concubine asked for lotus petals to be arranged like constellations again. Complained when Scorpio was upside down." You pause, grin, and tuck the ledger away for later. It feels oddly comforting, knowing those. Before you dealt with the same blend of reverence and absurdity. Later in the afternoon, you're summoned to the Department of Royal Supplies. It's time for the seasonal clothing inspection. Twice a year, every piece of official palace clothing is checked for condition, accuracy, and mystical alignment. That last part isn't technically written anywhere, but it's strongly implied by the head tailor's devotion to lucky thread knots and not letting anyone sneeze near the brocade. You stand alongside a row of other eunuchs as piles of robes are laid out like sacred scrolls. Royal blue court robes, scarlet for high ceremonies, plain gray for mourning, sun yellow for the queen. Each one is examined, refolded, and recorded with maddening precision. One robe has a dragon stitched with 5 claws instead of 4. The tailor gasps like someone stepped on a flute. "That's for the Emperor of China," she hisses. "We can't have 5 claws here." The robe is whisked away faster than a bribe in the treasury. Historians still debate whether these strict symbolic rules actually deterred political tension or simply gave people more ways to accidentally commit treason by fashion. Your job is to carry the past inspection ribbons from pile to pile. It's not glamorous, but it earns you proximity to palace rumors. For example, one attendant whispers that the Queen's lady-in-waiting secretly altered a robe to fit better. Another insists that the king prefers the color pine green but won't admit it because it clashes with the ancestral altar's paint. You nod solemnly, offering no comment. A good eunuch listens more than he speaks. Midway through the inspection, you're pulled aside again. Someone important has requested your presence in the royal library. You blink. The royal library? Most eunuchs aren't allowed there unless they're cleaning floors or delivering scrolls. You feel a thrill of both curiosity and dread. Did someone discover your hidden copy of Poems to Read When You Can't Yell? Inside, the library is cool and dim, the walls lined with red lacquered shelves filled with bound scrolls, accordion-fold books, and the occasional brush holder carved to resemble mountain peaks. The scent of ink and old bamboo fills the air. An elderly scholar with thick brows and a voice like sandpaper gestures you forward. You're the one who translated that poem last night? You nod. He squints, then hands you a thin volume. Try. This one. You open it carefully. It's a Ryukyu verse, written in classical Chinese with side notes in awkward Korean. You take a deep breath and begin reading aloud, translating as you go. Island-born breeze carries the weight of silence. He listens quietly, then grunts. You don't mangle it. Good. That's apparently a compliment. Over the next hour, you help him piece together a larger scroll intended as a gift for the Ryukyu delegates. It's a joint translation effort, and you enjoy the rhythm of it. Spoken lines, ink-stained fingers, pauses to argue whether Jade Breeze should be cool or longing. By the time you leave, your head feels pleasantly stuffed with metaphors. As night settles, you wander past the garden again and see the turtle still sunning itself. Seok is beside it, holding what looks like a pan flute. I've been trying. Different notes, he explains. Still nothing. Maybe it's tone deaf. Maybe it's judging us all in silence. You both sit and share the last rice cakes of the day, the moon peeking between the clouds like a bashful aunt. The palace is quieter now, its frenzy dimmed to a soft rustle of leaves and distant sandals on stone. Your day ends not with a ceremony, nor a crisis, but with soft laughter under the moon and the sound of a turtle doing absolutely nothing. And somehow, that's enough. Morning again, and this time, your wake-up call is a gong, a very loud, very insistent, very oversized brass gong, rung repeatedly by an enthusiastic palace boy who apparently believes the gods won't rise unless he ruptures someone's eardrum. You shuffle to your feet, grumbling under your breath and trying to shake off a dream involving the turtle, Seok's pan flute, and a poetry duel between Ryukyu envoys and a tree. Today is the king's official birthday banquet, which, in typical Joseon style, is less about cake and streamers and more about ancestral rites, moral symbolism, and making sure no one dies from undercooked duck. The eunuch compound is buzzing. Robes are pressed, inkstones are ground, and several poor souls are sent to the butcher's yard to supervise the ceremonial ox. You're spared livestock duty, thank the stars, and instead assigned to assist the Office of Banquet Coordination, which means scroll-checking, seating planning, and troubleshooting anyone who tries to swap their placement to sit closer to the dessert trays. You're handed a long scroll with the seating chart. Each name is inscribed next to a symbol: mountain, crane, lotus, plum blossom. The symbols indicate rank, mood alignment, and whether they've recently said anything publicly annoying. One official's name is marked with a tiny thundercloud. You ask why. He argued with the queen's cousin about the ethics of fermented persimmons, a senior eunuch mutters. She didn't appreciate his tone. Of course she didn't. You move next to the grand hall where the banquet will be held. The space is being transformed. Layers of fabric draped like waterfall mist. Low tables arranged into precise geometric harmony, and decorative screens that depict mythic beasts leaping from clouds like ambitious goats. It smells like sandalwood and rice glue. You help place calligraphy placards behind each official's spot, each inscribed with a single virtue. Dignity, temperance, filial piety. You wonder how many of these men actually live up to their labels. Historians still debate how much these moral-themed placements were taken seriously versus treated like sophisticated insults. Before the guests arrive, you're sent to the kitchen, annex to collect the symbolic dishes. Yes, there are symbolic dishes. Because why simply serve fish when you can serve it swimming in metaphor? There's one plate of crane-shaped dumplings for longevity, another of 5-color rice for harmony among the kingdoms, and your personal favorite, pears carved to resemble scholars in meditation. They look deeply worried. Carrying the tray back to the hall, you pass the queen's chamber and hear a distinct clink thud. A servant tells you she dropped her phoenix comb. Apparently it's bad luck. You're handed a silken pouch of dried mugwort and told to discreetly place it under her seat. You do so with all the subtlety of someone planting an emotional support herb under royalty. The banquet begins just before sunset. You take your post at the periphery, standing straight, silent, but always alert. From here, you see everything, the polite bows, the not-so-polite side-eyes, the moment when two officials try to start eating early and are death-stared by the Confucian inspector. The king makes a toast. His voice is calm, distant, aged like scroll paper. He thanks the heavens, his ancestors, and the many diligent hands who sustain this court. A few heads turn toward your direction, and you feel a flicker of strange pride. Then, the feast. Dishes arrive in waves. Silken tofu with pine nuts, marinated lotus root, glazed eel in a bowl shaped like a moon, broth so clear you could see your reflection and your regrets in it. One noble refuses to eat because the rice grains aren't pointing north. Another dips his finger into the sauce, declares it a little rebellious, and proceeds to eat 3 helpings. Meanwhile, you and your fellow eunuchs circulate silently, refilling teacups, adjusting cushions, and rescuing fallen chopsticks like ninjas of etiquette. The entertainment follows. Court dancers whose sleeves flutter like cranes in slow motion, and a zither performance that sounds like someone serenading. The stars from under a willow tree. At one point, a masked performer reenacts the founding of Joseon, using only eyebrow movements and interpretive sneezing. Seok leans close and whispers, "I think the turtle could do better." You barely stifle a laugh. Then comes the poetry exchange. Tradition during royal banquets. High officials compose spontaneous poems to honor the king. Most are flowery, forgettable, and overly fond of metaphors involving jade. But one minister stands and recites something sharper. A ruler who sees all must still blink. The candle that watches the storm does not burn forever. A heavy silence. The king smiles faintly. Whether he's amused, offended, or thinking about dessert, no one knows. Court poetry is like that, half art, half swordplay. As the evening winds down, guests loosen their belts slightly, discreetly behind fans. and servants carry out bowls of fermented pear sorbet. You help clear empty dishes, folding each used napkin like a sacred text. One of the Ryukyu envoys approaches you as you're stacking bowls. You poured tea very precisely, he says, like someone who knows that silence has weight. You bow, unsure whether that was praise or a critique of your conversational skills. He nods and hands you a small folded square. Rice paper with a miniature ink turtle drawn in one stroke. For your turtle, he says. You thank him quietly, tucking it into your sleeve. By the time the last lanterns are dimmed, the hall smells of extinguished candles and content exhaustion. You walk back toward your quarters, feet aching, eyes heavy. Siak is already curled up on his mat, softly snoring. You glance at the turtle's box. It's open, empty. Your heart skips. Then you see it, perched on the window ledge, staring out at the moon like a wise philosopher contemplating whether the stars are edible. You watch it a moment. You did good tonight, you whisper. It does not sing. But it also doesn't fall off the ledge, so you take that as a compliment. Sleep is brief, and morning creeps in like a cat with cold paws. Your body aches in the usual spots, shoulders, knees, pride. You lie there a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of palace life stirring. Brush scrapes from calligraphy practice, a faint broom sweeping stone, someone coughing in a way that sounds suspiciously like a political statement. You rise, stretch, and sip the barley water left on the sill overnight. It's warm, slightly bitter, and tastes like modest ambition. Today is a quieter day. No foreign dignitaries, no banquets, no turtle-related drama. Or so you think. After the morning duties, checking the rain records, confirming the king's rice, porridge consistency, slightly thicker today. Seok has a theory about planetary alignment. You're told to assist with the palace archives. The archives are dusty, monumentally dusty. They're stored beneath the western hall, in a wing so old, even the spiders hold scholarly opinions. You descend into the musty depths with a waxed paper lantern and a list of scrolls to retrieve. The air smells like dried ink, mold, and the sharp whisper of forgotten scandals. Your assignment: locate a series of eunuch journals dating back to the reign of King Seijo. Apparently, there's a renewed interest in administrative precedent. What to do when two concubines throw kimchi at each other and cite Confucius. The scrolls are tucked behind an imposing wooden cabinet labeled Reports Routine Boring. You spend nearly half an hour crawling through stacks, brushing off silverfish, and muttering oaths about whoever decided that handwriting size 6 is dignified. You finally locate the scrolls and settle onto a low stool to peek inside. And there it is, a diary, ink-faded, but legible. One eunuch's account of daily palace life, written in casual shorthand. Rain, Minister of Rights, again wore that hat. Concubine number 4 insulted concubine number 2's poetry. Food tasted of apathy. You chuckle, then pause. One entry catches your eye. Strange creature in garden pond again. The one with the mirrored shell. Appears only after solstice. Scholars still argue whether it's real or an elaborate metaphor. You blink. Mirrored shell. You glance at the folded Ryukyu drawing tucked in your sleeve from last night. One-stroke turtle. You suddenly feel like you're in a very slow detective novel. You pocket the journal and report back to your overseer. He waves you off with a nod, already lost in an argument about the acceptable color range for chrysanthemum banners. The rest of your day is filled with quieter tasks. You help a calligrapher arrange scrolls for a visiting monk. You hold a lantern steady while a carpenter repairs a lattice screen in the Queen's quarters. You hand-deliver a cup of medicinal tea to the chief scribe, who accepts it with the grim air of a man who knows it's mostly boiled bark, but your mind keeps circling back to the mirrored turtle. That evening you return to the garden pond. It's the place mentioned in the old scroll, overgrown, under-visited, framed by willows with bad attitudes. The water is still, coated with lazy algae. You wait. Nothing. You sigh and turn to leave when Seok appears behind you, holding a small lacquered box. "I found this in the archives," he says. "It had your name on it. Well, not your actual name, but your appointment number." He hands it over. Inside, a perfectly smooth oval stone with an engraving of a turtle shell pattern. And under that, a single note. The one who listens long. Enough may hear the palace breathing. You both stare at it. Seok finally mutters, "Maybe that's code for get more sleep." You place the stone back in the box, unsure what to make of it. Historians still argue whether these small symbols, objects tucked in corners, notes scribbled without titles, were messages, private reflections, or just the result of too much ginseng tea. Back at your quarters, you finish the day filing tomorrow's schedule. It's a simple slate: altar cleaning, herb inventory, and poetry judging for a youth contest. You already dread it. As you tuck away your robe for the night, you notice something unusual. Your turtle, who's now made itself a regular guest, at your window ledge, is staring at the moon again. But this time, it's holding something in its mouth. A tiny lotus seed. You approach slowly. It blinks, drops the seed gently into your palm, and waddles away with the self-satisfaction of a sage who just answered your deepest life question using interpretive gardening. You turn the seed over. It's warm, improbably. Maybe it's just coincidence. Or maybe this whole palace has layers no one talks about. Hidden messages in tea, turtles that only appear for those who've read enough scrolls, meanings wrapped in daily tasks like fortune cookies with 0 sugar. You fall asleep. That night with the box, the seed, and the scroll close to your mat. Not for safety, just for closeness. The palace exhales. Crickets take over. Even the stones seem to sigh. You dream of willows, of mirrored shells, of laughter echoing across marble, and the warmth of quiet recognition. It's your final day in this chapter of court life. Not that anyone says it out loud. There's no farewell ceremony for those still very much alive, still wearing the same robe, still attending to the same teacups. The palace doesn't announce transitions. It lets them unfold in the small spaces, between scrolls, under eaves, inside the shift of morning routines. You rise early, woken by the familiar chime of a bell 2 courtyards away. Your feet remember the cold of the floor. Your robe is slightly softer than it was months ago, and your hands, without realizing it, have stopped trembling when lighting the first incense of the day. Your assignment this morning is mundane but ceremonial. You are to assist in refreshing the ancestral tablets in the inner shrine. An honor, technically, but more importantly, an exercise in moving slowly, bowing often and not sneezing near anything carved. The ancestral hall is cool and dim. Columns painted in faded vermilion rise like frozen prayers. Each tablet, square, precise, anonymous, represents a king, a queen, or a royal ancestor of sufficient importance and stern eyebrow energy. You kneel, wipe, bow, repeat. The priest. Nearby chants in a voice that sounds like silk being folded underwater. As you move, a thought flits through your head like a sparrow. These tablets have outlived the ones they honor. And you, anonymous in the archives of time, are one of the few whose hands actually touch them. A gentle brush, a slow wipe. A moment of quiet, unsung reverence. Historians still debate whether eunuchs saw these duties as spiritual work, emotional burden, or simply another box on a checklist kept somewhere near their breakfast log. After the shrine, you're sent to deliver a message scroll to the Queen's senior lady-in-waiting. You walk the stone corridor slowly, soaking in everything. The play of sunlight on curved roof tiles, the slight bend in the corridor near the ginkgo tree, the way the wood creaks exactly 3 times beneath your left foot. She accepts the scroll. With a nod, eyes you for a beat too long, and then, unexpectedly, hands you a folded square of silk. For your steady hands, she says with a faint smile. Inside, a small embroidered patch, the image of a turtle and a flowering reed. You try to speak, but she waves you off with a practiced flick of the sleeve. Don't read into it, she says, but maybe do. Back in your quarters, Seok is packing inkstones into a chest. I heard you might be reassigned, he says casually, not looking at you. Outer Palace, Garden Division. You blink. That's not a demotion. In fact, it's quieter. More trees. Fewer politics. Is that bad? You ask. He shrugs. Depends. Do you like breathing? You both laugh. The rest of the day is a blur of tidying loose ends. You write up a small record of the previous week's events, minus the turtle. Poetry, plus the spicy eggplant incident, and file it under miscellaneous mild confusion. You say a few quiet goodbyes. One boy gives you a drawing of a peach the size of a house. Another offers half a biscuit and a warning. Don't trust the radishes. You nod solemnly. Radishes can be deceitful. As sunset approaches, you find yourself wandering, courtyard to corridor, tile to tile. Your feet take you to the garden pond again. It's still. You kneel near the edge, rest the embroidered turtle patch on your palm, and whisper nothing in particular. The surface ripples. A small, familiar shell bobs into view. It doesn't sing, but it does look at you like it knows more than you do. You smile. As you stand, you hear footsteps. The king's chief astrologer passes behind you, glancing at the turtle. Still following you, eh? He mutters, almost to himself. Some things know where they belong. You watch as he disappears around the corner, and for a moment, the world is balanced. Lanterns are being lit. The palace exhales. You turn back toward your quarters, the embroidered patch tucked safely into your sleeve. One footstep, then another. And in that rhythm, a lullaby. Not sung, not heard, but felt in every breath of the old palace wood. And now, listener, as your eyelids grow heavier and the pace of history fades into silence, let's slow everything down. Let the court fade into flickering light, silk robes swaying in soft wind, the scent of ink and pine lingering like a dream half remembered. The chatter of ministers, the clink of jade cups, The endless scrolls of mundane days, all of it softens. You feel the stillness settle. You're no longer following footsteps on stone, but drifting just above them, weightless, warm, at peace in the echoes of rituals repeated for centuries, the turtle, the tea, the quiet dignity of daily service. They blur together now into a single gentle hum, one long breath held by history. You are here. You were always here. And the palace remembers you. So close your eyes now. You've done enough for one lifetime. Let the night hold you. Let the silence say your name. Let dreams begin.